Boa tarde, é com prazer que eu estou aqui para apresentar a palestra do professor Luiz Marcio Cysneiros, tá certo? Agora, o título da palestra do Luiz Marcio é Towards Achieving Social Responsible Software, ou seja, como é que a gente faz com que o software seja responsável socialmente. Mas antes, deixa eu entrar aqui numa apresentação meio diferente. Esse artigo que a gente está vendo aí na tela, Trustworthy AI from Principles to Practice, escrito por uma série de pessoas que, como vocês podem ver, são tanto da universidade como dos pesos pesados da internet, tá certo? E eu vim a saber desse artigo há pouco tempo e queria mostrar para vocês uma coisa interessante. Eu vou pular para a página 7, né? E nessa página 7, a gente vai ver que os autores falam aqui. A transparência requer que a informação seja disponibilizada no sistema e tem, por muito tempo, sido reconhecido como um requisito na engenharia de software. E agora eu vou pular para a página 31. E a gente vai ver aqui que a referência é um artigo do professor Luiz Marcio, com a professora Vera, que foi publicado em 2009 no UER. Acontece que esse artigo, que foi, como ele está dizendo aqui, foi aceito recentemente, ele está na ACM Computing Service. É simplesmente o terceiro journal com o top rank de Impact Factor, né? Então, é uma coisa que mostra a contribuição do Luiz Marcio, bastante pontual. O Luiz Marcio é professor associado da York University. Ele foi um dos primeiros creio que o primeiro a mostrar como os requisitos não funcionais interagem, né, com modelos de requisitos, no caso, com os modelos da UML. Então, a tese dele, o artigo dele na I3E Software Engineering e consequentes artigos foram fundamentais para que as pessoas realmente passassem a prestar atenção mais na questão de requisitos não funcionais. Então, o Luiz Marcio trabalhou e vem trabalhando muito tempo com catálogos de requisitos não funcionais e, recentemente, passou a ter uma atenção especial exatamente sobre requisitos não funcionais que são de impacto social. Com isso, tendo trazer essa ideia de software mais responsável para a sociedade, com mais responsabilidade, né? E ele vai falar, certamente, vai dar muito mais informações do que essa breve introdução. Então, professor Luiz Marcio, com muito prazer, a gente está aqui para escutar a sua apresentação. Então, passo aí para você. Pode dividir a tela. Você pode tirar a minha tela, por favor, quem está gerenciando, para poder colocar a tela do Luiz Marcio. Obrigado. Luiz Marcio? Pode apresentar sua tela?
Tá. Então, tem que share screen de novo.
Isso, por favor. Isso, beleza, estamos aí.
Tá bom?
A bola está contigo, Luiz Marcio.
Ok, obrigado, Júlio. Aliás, obrigado a toda a organização do WR por ter me convidado. E nós vamos mostrar vamos dizer assim, nova perspectiva de approach ao desenvolvimento de software, pelo menos o que deve ser, que é, na verdade, that actually will bring us to a different concept, which is basically social responsible software. And let's talk about this in a while. So to help us, let me ask Scott to help us. Scott, want to beam up. So in that sense, that all the history started, like I think it is 5 years ago, and I was actually looking at business more than anything else. So I was searching in literature linked to business, and that was actually something nice because it opened my eyes to a few stuff that we are going to cover today. And in that sense, what first called my attention is actually the social need for social responsible software. So let's remind what Julio said, that software is omnipresent in daily life. And starting to look at that, we saw that the consumers have a need to trust software and software developers, which doesn't totally make sense at the beginning, but when you look at it, it actually makes total sense. So in that case, the consumers have a need to trust software and development. However, trust is frequently violated. For example, the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2018. That actually leads to situations where consumers often lose faith in products and in the companies, most importantly, behind them. So trust is, in fact, even more vital in critical mission systems, like, for example, autonomous vehicle, medical AI, and medical system. So, like, for example, autonomous vehicles and medical systems are two important kind of domains that trust is very, very important. And by the way, it's actually the case that if you don't cope with that, you might have impacts on legal responsibilities. So that leads us to think, okay, how do we achieve responsible software? So for that sense, I was looking at on the literature, and I found out this notion of corporate social responsibility. So which basically one thing that is promoted by the business area. So people in the business area, they do actually value, and a lot sometimes, corporate social responsibility. Keep in mind, that's not a software conception. This is actually an administrative approach. So in that sense, adoption of CSR helps build trust, and it is critical to a firm's success. So the CSR leads to improve stakeholder engagement, and increase in mutual trust and cooperation. It's perceived, and in fact it's very close, to social responsibility of a company, which increases the stakeholder trust. Needless to say that charitable giving help gives help to population and to reputation and search interest. So that's again trust appearing as a high-end goal that we actually have to follow. So the perceived social responsibility of a company increases the stakeholder trust. We also found that charitable giving helps reputation and trust for companies. So the corporate dynamic transparency foster more trust than static transparency. So then we actually started thinking about, okay, how we bring the corporate social responsibility into software development, which kind of approach we need. So basically we are trying to adapt the software development to cope with corporate social responsibilities. And by the way, CSR promotes loyalty, repeat business, and purchase intention. The adoption of CSR helps build trust, and it's critical to a firm's success. CSR actually also leads to improve stakeholder engagement and increase in mutual trust and cooperation. It is perceived, of course, as a social responsibility of a company that will increase stakeholder trust. And what's more, charitable giving, of course, helps reputation, and in consequence, it actually helps trust. So Professor Julie Late and I started to work on the idea of how we actually adapt the software development process to achieve a goal of developing software responsible software. So pretty much we decided to but incorporate the corporate social responsibility, playing a role in creating trust between customers and business. And in this case also, we have to adapt CSR business model, and that will guide a company's commitment to manage social, environmental, and economic effects of its operations. To be responsible in line with public expectations. So therefore, it was our goal, and we obtained it a kind of a guide to develop trustworthy software and social responsible software. So that was the software interdependency graph, where you can see that upper level software is actually trust, but actually we need transparency to help trust. Also, we will actually use ethics to help trust, safe, private, security, and by the way, all of them with the possibility of generating, impacting legal disputes. So research approach that we applied. Problem, how do we encode the social perspective of knowledge and truth? So how can we provide a body of knowledge to facilitate the understanding and delivery of trustworthy software? So social factors, of course, is a relatively well-studied area. However, how this concept of trust is very limited to the trust area. You have not so much work on trust applied to software development. So sample from business domain technology of CSR is nice to be used to understand the factors that influence trustworthiness while focusing on the NFRs of transparency and ethics. So keep in mind that these concepts of related to CSR, it will be grounded, it will be based actually in the grounded theory. So we might need, and we definitely need to approach a social science illustration method. And in our case, grounded theory is essential, plus the use of the non-functional requirements framework. So still it comes to the challenge, how translate to NFR perspective from grounded theory. So in terms of grounded theory, systematic methodology, the grounded theory is a systematic methodology applied to qualitative research. So it's grounded and most valuable to the software engineer and requirements engineer. It applies inductive reasoning as opposed to a falsifiable hypothesis model. Compromise of stages of data review and stages of data coding and grouping of coding. So in that sense, we start with the idea, which is actually typical from grounded theory, with a literature review. So in that sense, we looked hard on the literature review approach, following the work of Wolf Skinner, where the approach to ground theory is a literature review method. Which means that we will, at the end, use keyword search such as trustworthy, or transparency, or ethical, for example. So what is the criteria for inclusion? It has to be, every literature has to be peer-reviewed and written in English. For exclusion of works, in the case of, we exclude cases of duplicate results, and what actually falls outside scope of our research. So needless to say that we will be looking intensively on significant literature from the business domain, and of course, social sciences. So open coding is pretty much the first step, the first approach. And open coding actually involves analysis and identification of salient concepts, such as we can see here in this table. So then we actually may apply axial and selective coding on the case that axial coding involves making a relationship between categories and other categories. First, demonstrating causal conditions, phenomena, strategies, contexts, and relationships. So they could result in either operationalizations or soft goals. So it actually will make the connection between concepts, which is really important. So selective coding it integrates concepts from open coding and additional things that actually always will be leading to trust, using contribution types, which is pretty much positive or negative, and the level of severity, which is break, hurt, help, and make. So try to figure out how actually we can translate or produce, let's say, the matrix SIG translation. So in terms of this, it comes the idea of mapping, where categories elicited from opening coding season maps directly to primary soft goal. Concepts from axial coding map to a personalization or soft goals, depending on the context within the literature, of course, depending on the course of actions mapped to to the operationalizers, otherwise mapped to soft goal. So concepts elicited from either axial or selective code can be found in this website. So in our case, when we talk about axial coding, again, we actually look at relating categories to other categories for causal conditions, phenomena, strategies, context, and relationships. In terms of selective coding, it integrates concepts from open coding and axial coding with central goal, trust in this case. And then again, the contribution file will be either positive or negative, with level of severity being break, hurt, help, or make. So again, in terms of open coding and when you look at open coding, we are also looking at the analysis and identification of salient concepts. Concepts are then added, merged, or separated based on evaluation cycles. And it also gives rise to salient categories refined into subgoals for NFR catalog. So again, we use in the literature review the concepts Wolfensk with these key searches, as I said before. And once more, we actually based our research on the use of grounded theory, which is a systematic methodology applied to qualitative research. It also presents grounded analysis valuable to SENRE. It is and can be applied inductive reasoning as opposed to a falsifiable hypothesis model. It also composed of stages of data review, stages of data coding, and grouping of coding into concepts and categories. So, in terms of research a problem, how can we actually encode this social perspective of knowledge and trust? How can we provide a body of knowledge to facilitate the understanding and delivery of software trustworthy? So in that sense, it calls us to pay attention to social factors that affect trust in a general, but they actually are quite used, quite actually mentioned in the literature, but they actually talk about trust in an individual way. So there are not so much work linking this kind of approach to whatever we are proposing, which is reproducible and a software that will be translated into trust. So therefore comes again, goal here is how can we provide a body of knowledge to facilitate understanding and delivery of trustworthy software. So in that sense, we will actually always have, as I said, trust relatively well understood alone, but not in the context of software development. So sample from business domain knowledge of CSR should be used to facilitate
Você está repetindo as transparências.
Já vi. So let's go back. So we actually have to face how we provide nature-specific translations. So categories elicited for open code map directly to primary soft goals. Concepts from actual coding also map to personalization or soft control. That's depending on the context within the literature, and the cost of actions will map to a personalization. Otherwise, they will map to soft goals. So connections between concepts elicited from either actual or selectively coding map to relationship between elements should be a point, and you can actually find the set of actually seeds that we obtain at the end on this website here. This website. So then again, we started guiding us to use not only a bit of the personal knowledge, but most of all, actually to use what we learned in our research, in our literature review, to guide us building a catalog. So we want to provide a catalog that is full enough, but not complete, but full enough to help software engineers to build trustworthy software. So if you look here, actually to get trust, I need to retain privacy, security, customer loyalty, internal trust, ethics, and so on. So in that fact, we actually elicited 8 actually categories and their overall impact on trust. So let's identify each area. So corporate social responsibility is one of the catalogs. So if you look at it, We actually demonstrate the corporate social responsibility is an important issue that actually helps ethics. And at the same time, it helps trust. So reputation detailed catalog. So again, one of the things that we found out that was very important to obtain was reputation of a company. So in that sense, when you look at the SIG, we know that we can see that reputation is hurt by errors or malfunctions. Of course, is also affected by history, and all of them will help trust. So in terms of reputation, it's comprised of a history, consistency, errors, and failures. The history of a company directly affects its reputation. Consistency directly affects reputation in many different levels, in many different situations, and we actually have to study and evaluate how we actually apply, for example, the history of the company, the history of the enterprise to obtain trustworthiness, which means, of course, that a history of trustworthiness, unethical behavior, lies, and manipulation severely harms or even possible break trust. Trust repair is heavily dependent on persuasiveness and integrity. So keep in mind also that trust repair is very difficult to obtain. So internal trust, in terms of internal trust, it will actually help. It will help trust, but in another manner, downsizing, for example, or excessive openness will hurt internal trust. Then again, in terms of internal trust, we actually have to look also at external trust. So the trust between a company and an organization and its stakeholder, mainly referring to consumers. So external trust is the primary goal. So another thing that has to be kept in mind is that we need to be prepared to deal with trust training, managerial competence, ethical behavior, open internal communication, ethical facilitators, openness, integrity, and benevolence history. Those are actually important to foster internal trust. So the excessive opening openness may result in breach of confidentiality of personal life and therefore erodes trust. So in terms of ethics, where we started studying that, we actually analyze ethics and how ethics could be actually related here. So ethics will for something certain. Oh my God. Okay, let's get the arrow. So you can see that, for example, ethics helps on trust is, on the other hand, help ethics are hurt by errors and malfunctions, and actually it's positively influenced by clear ethical guidelines and, of course, transparency. So in terms of ethics helps trust, which basically uh, reflects situations where the state of being ethically sound is in place. It applies reasonable ethical principles. Communication is a restriction on ethical principles. That's actually kind of obvious. So the elicitation principles should be clearly communicated and acted upon. The communication itself is vital. Ethical facilitators of trust are benevolence, integrity, competency, openness, concern, liability. And then we come to transparency. Transparency being a very big one. That's just not all S3 is represented here. But when you look at transparency, for example, you can see that we have many situations that transparency will be involved. So we have assumptions that will actually will hurt transparency, vague transparency, which also, of course, hurts transparency. In any case, transparency helps trust, and so on. Transparency. So, in general, we can say that transparency helps trust, although it might not be total, 100% total. So, in that sense, transparency may take many different forms. And those different forms of transparency, under different conditions, have different effects. And transparency is unlikely to produce less trust without certain protections. So, for example, corporations must exhibit themselves to care about stakeholders' rights. Information sharing making organization information transparent helps trustworthy. Procedural transparency promotes business, disciplinary actions, and so on. Transparent production create an or acquisition of product and service. Trust transparency, which is also transitive, it is a central mechanism of trust creation and repair. For example, government. There is the issue of false transparency too. Transparency as a trust repair mechanism requires honesty, comprehensiveness, and balance. So positive information without disclosing negative information is inherently untrustworthy. So assumptions, if assumptions about the information are made, especially false assumptions, then transparency loses its inherent value. It exacerbates the issue of false transparency. So transparency that are actually used just with marketing intentions, which basically can, at the end, bring a lot of problems for the company. In terms of assumptions, well, if assumptions about information are being made, especially if we use false assumptions, then, of course, as I said, transparency loses its inherent value. Sincerity of transparency. Transparency does not foster trust if it is not genuine. So in terms of transparency, again, it helps. Safety critical systems, very important, and actually with a lot of implications in terms of the legal area. So it's clear of full explanations of inner workings of technology. The system confidence levels in itself is an important thing to look at. And of course, we will be dealing with open source audited, or at least federally audited. On the other hand, it may hurt over-reliance and misplaced trust that can be and generate hard, drastic consequences. So if it is revealed severely that the trust consumers places in undeserving, then trust is catastrophically lost. And in that sense, the threats to validity in this work, not only these threats that I'm going to say, but they are basically the most important to mention. So we have constructive validity. And that actually is natural. It is inseparably linked to research, but also may present possible bias. And by the way, this bias actually can be helped by the use of grounded theory. External validity is actually doable otherwise. So can we generalize the ideas presented? So we don't have that much trust. We just have part of the information in terms of trust, mostly in terms of trust and software development. Literally, primarily from business and social sides, it does extend to software. Very likely, yes. Assuming that trust in companies and trust in products are intertwined and correlated. So experimental validation. So we try to evaluate our work in terms of the usefulness of the trust catalog, and is of course between subjects and science. In terms of sampling, we actually use undergrad students from a single class. One experimental variable was used in formal resource available to the participant in the case of access to trust catalogs. So in that sense, the null hypothesis is there is no difference between having and not having the trust catalog as a resource for software. Given a software scenario, participants are asked to list NFRs and operationalizations in the form, of course, of requirements statements. So at the end, we actually obtained a value of recall 0.7, precision 1, which was not 1, it actually was 0.9, just that the software didn't want to keep it 0.9. I don't want. Don't ask me why. And the F measure is 0.883. So, in terms of conclusion, we are presenting here the first approach to bring societal concepts such as transparency and ethics and RE. So we actually will be dealing and proposing with initial NFR catalogs and the effects of transparency and acts on trust. In fact, we have a little bit more than that. So ethics, we really realized from the grounded theory part that ethics is going to be involved almost always in good software development, and most of all in this kind of software. So we demonstrated before that ethics helps trust, and that transparency helps trust. Generally, at least, but not always, with some restrictions and under circumstances. In terms of work, we are planning to work on trust, transitivity, and transparency transitivity. Pros and cons of ethical dilemmas is going to be an important issue to be further researched. Bring also the idea of pros and cons of ethical dilemmas, so we have to get it better, and how different courses of actions affect trust. And the challenge here is no current legislation or case law to support one side or another. So it's another line of research is how can we do that? Thank you. We are open for
Luiz Marcio,
yeah.
thank you very much. Very good talk. And exactly as I said before, is applying the ideas of structuring knowledge from requirements towards better understanding of how software can be more socially responsible. Very good. I'm going to see here there are questions. Danbury, I don't know if you see, I can read for you. Luiz Marcio, can you see this work helping the work to identify concerns that are listed in a requirement specs for AI or learning machines that result from machine learning? And he mentioned here a paper that was presented in this where by Hugo Villamizar. It was Hugo presented a paper in this where showing approach to requirements for systems that we will use machine learning. Okay, I talk in English, I'm sorry, because the question was in English. Basicamente, a pergunta do professor Danbury é essa: se você vê uma maneira de como isso ajuda a identificar preocupações, né, que são necessárias para a construção de sistemas de inteligência artificial. Então, essa é a primeira pergunta.
Bom, basicamente, a gente tem que continuar a desenvolver todos os SIGs. A gente tem que adicionar SIGs ao que a gente já tem. E a gente tem que adicionar, vamos dizer assim, outros requisitos não funcionais que precisam ser mais estudados ou estudados pela primeira vez. And in this case, it's basically how we actually develop this kind of approach in terms of research. So how we actually can produce this kind of approach and deal with that in the future.
Ok. A gente tem aqui o professor Jaelson. Jaelson.
Oi, Luiz. Muito obrigado aí pela sua apresentação. Sua Keynote foi bastante interessante. Parece ser um tema aí que nós estamos muito carentes, né? No momento ainda. Então, minha pergunta é no sentido de a quem é que seria aplicado aí os seus catálogos, né? Você fez a experimentação com alunos, de certa forma, né? Para tentar validar, ter aí um early feedback, né? Que faz sentido. Mas, assim, eu tenho duas perguntas. A primeira é, quem é que você vê que seria o usuário principal aí do, né, todo esse conhecimento, essa base de conhecimento aí tão interessante aí que vocês obtiveram?
Bom, afinal das contas, vai ser at the end of the case, is going to be actually the user, I mean, the customer. Customer will be the final recipient of this type of work, but of course, more specifically, software developers, we actually will have, and already have some, a base, technology base on software transparency and software social responsible software that will help them. So we have already a lot of knowledge translated, as we saw before, a lot of knowledge translated into SIGs. So this is actually one of the important things that we have.
I mean, in a sense, software developers are not, I mean, usually empowered to do these decisions, no, to follow these, well, let's say, thought requirements, no, because it seems that there is another, let's say, layer above them, which are really the people that should be responsible for ensuring that, you know, the social responsibility of the software. The software developer in general is more into delivering, you know, the functional requirements. They are usually, you know, very busy. You know, the demand is very high. You know, they don't really care much, or they don't think about non-functional requirements as a whole. And if they really need to take into consideration these extra non-functional requirements in order to make the software more socially responsible, I may be wrong, but I believe that this is beyond their responsibility. It's more, let's say, a managerial type of responsibility. You know, it's a company's enterprise decision. So, what do you think of my comment?
Absolutely. There's gonna have another layer above us, but once people decide, we need orientation, let's say like that, to guide, to build the software in that way. So that's the case that we are producing here. Very concentrated knowledge in terms of software developing applied to software responsible software.
Yeah, that leads to another question. You know? If no, I will translate to Portuguese after. Okay, so the next question is okay. If they have to do it, in a sense, you know, these managers or, you know, the people above them, I think that they only need to do that if they are compelled. You know, they really have some compliance mechanism, you know, that is put on top of them. So for certain type of systems, such as safe critical systems, you know, as you mentioned, a medical system, you know, transport system, etc., this is the case, no? But if you think in other types of not so critical applications, you know, like the majority of the system, I don't see them as, you know, something that is going to be really, you know, implemented. Então, traduzindo para português, o que eu estava comentando é que se a responsabilidade dessa, né, digamos, exigência, né, de tornar o software mais transparente, mas socialmente, né, responsável, não é do desenvolvedor do software, e sim da gerência, né, daquelas pessoas que são responsáveis pela empresa, raramente isso iria acontecer, né? Apenas se ela for obrigada, né? Se for um domínio regulado, né? Como o caso de sistemas médicos, sistemas de transporte, né? Então, eu queria ouvir essa opinião, né? Para esses tipos de domínio, me parece que é razoável, né? A gente esperar e ter esse tipo de né? Extra requirements, né? Extra non-functional requirements. Mas na maioria dos sistemas, esse não seria o caso, né? O que você acha? É isso mesmo?
Eu não tenho tanta certeza, não. Eu acho que tudo bem, hoje em dia não é, mas, de novo, nossa visão tem que ser para o futuro e não para agora. Então, eu acho que, sim, existe espaço para o uso dessa informação. Eu acho que várias pessoas, vários desenvolvedores will actually, how can I say, choose to use this approach. And as you said, for specific situations, for specific areas, specific problems that will be given to us. So people from marketing or whatever, they will actually guide us in terms of what we need to develop and what we need to deliver. And at the time that we are asked for, then again, we have the source to use it and help us develop the software.
Let me give you a scenario, right? A possible scenario. Suppose that I'm a developer and I notice that the software that is being developed is not ethical. Okay? What should I do? Should I report that to my senior managers? Or should I go public, and say that? I mean, because this is something that is not required by law at the moment, for many of the domains. So what do you think is going to happen? I know that I'm violating your nice, NFR catalog. Okay, so it's not the case, but it's kind of limited my scope, what I can do as a developer. Então, para aqueles que estão vendo em português, eu falei de um cenário possível, onde um desenvolvedor percebeu que o software que está sendo solicitado, que está sendo desenvolvido, não é ético. O que ele deveria fazer? Ele viu lá no catálogo de Cysneiros, isso era uma necessidade, mas ele não pode atender. O que ele vai fazer? Vai relatar à sua gerência, ou ele vai ir público e dizer, olha, não confie nessa empresa aqui porque não estão fazendo coisas corretas. Então, como seria resolver essa situação?
Com certeza. Com certeza. Mas, de novo, but then again, keep in mind that sometimes ethical things, for example, as you said, they may not be simply applied. So they might be legally obligated to be followed. Because if not, your company will actually be fined or will ultimately be punished. So there is the aspect of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Obrigado, Jaelson. Roxana. Oi, Roxana.
Hi, everyone. Sorry. Professor Luis, thank you for the speech. I like a lot this topic, and also I want to thank you for inviting me to collaborate with you with this work. My question is about the validation of catalogs, because this is very, very difficult when reviewers always complaining how to validate these catalogs. So the question is personal to you about this grounded theory you performed. Before the grounded theory, I think you had an intuition of these qualities being related. And then after the grounded theory, did you found something new or just confirmed what you already had?
A lot. We found many new things. So it's kind of, yes, I started with some thoughts, mostly about business software things alone. So I was not considering the necessity eventually to produce this kind of catalog and this kind of approach. But which means, of course, that we started by applying our knowledge, applying our vision, and then we escalated it to apply something that could be done, could be real, could be helpful, which was pretty much the production of social responsible software. And at that point, we understood that developing software with CSR in mind, it was actually a very good thing. And for us, it also provide us with the ability, with the possibility of how can I say that? Of enhancing that work. And then again, as you know, this is only the top of the iceberg. So we already are working, well, you know that, in other extensions, in other ideas. So that's what it is important.
Sure. Thanks, Professor Luiz.
Bom, então, temos... Alguém gostaria de fazer mais perguntas ao professor Luiz Marcio? Podem usar o Jaelson novamente? Diga, Jaelson.
Se tiver mais alguém aí, eu passo. Mas a minha curiosidade é que você fez a sua busca, né, sua string, né, de busca inicial, baseada aí em termos, né, que são bem razoáveis, né? Mas, assim, tendo trabalhado recentemente, né, até o Júlio participou na banca, né, do Arissa, né, que foi apresentada aqui nesse evento, uma questão de interação humano-robô, né, do ponto de vista de confiança, né? Então, ela fez muito levantamento da literatura na área de confiança em geral, não necessariamente de sistemas robóticos, né, mas ela trabalhou nessa multidisciplinaridade. Confiança em geral, confiança em interações humanas, confiança em interações com máquinas, né, etc. Muito do que você apresentou tinha um overlap, né, assim, a gente pode ver agora, olhando, que tem muito na confiança nas máquinas, né? Confiança na automação, né? Confiança na interação, né? Mas, assim, eu queria saber se vocês chegaram a considerar isso também, né? Confiança não, né, no business, né, na empresa, mas confiança na interação humana com os sistemas que as empresas fornecem.
No doubt about that. one of the things that we see as necessary is to rearrange the information, to rearrange those soft goals, verify for duplicity, etc., and enhance our soft goals, our C's. So this is definitely on our future research, and we think it is very much necessary.
Yeah, because to our surprise, what we found out is that the area of trust is well studied, in various other fields, and there are lots of taxonomies, coming, from 2 or 3 decades ago. So there were lots of, possible views on trust, and there is a subfield in certain areas that has devoted a lot of effort in trying to understand just this aspect. And I think now that we are becoming more and more interested in autonomous systems, in AI type of application, that we are kind of reinventing the wheel in some sense. We are thinking of concepts that have been studied in other contexts for many, many years. So I think we need to share our worries with these other people who usually come from social science. It's quite different from us that come from the technical community. That's my remark. We have to broaden. We have to see other areas as well.
But that's where it all started, let's say. It was about looking at social opinions, social aspects, social concepts, not that much softer. I mean, things related to software. We actually were thinking about the general and the business perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Ok.
So, but this is another view, the business perspective, but there are other views as well related to trust. Many, many views. Okay, thank you.
Ok, Professor Dunbarry.
Yeah, the thing is, even more than engaging social sciences and other things, I think we need to just engage requirement engineers, because the thing is, they're not considering these issues when they're starting to do requirement engineering for systems. So they, I mean, let ourselves become good at this, because this kind of stuff cannot be added to a system later on. It's got to be designed in from the beginning. So this is why we're talking about it at an RE conference. Because it's necessary for requirement engineers to be concerned with this sort of stuff right from the beginning.
Right.
I'm pounding on my desk.
I see. Oh, I hear. Okay.
I agree.
I hope my pounding didn't send Luiz Marcio
away. No, Luiz Marcio, are you with us? Luiz Marcio? Cadê o Luiz Marcio? Bom,
we cannot trust our technical systems.
Eu tinha uma pergunta aqui para o Luiz Marcio e do Henrique.
Let me say something. The reason I've been coming into my office is that here in Canada, the companies that provide internet to people's homes are very flaky. And Luiz Marcio is connected from home. So I think he's suffering from Roger's problem, just like I do. And that as a result, I've been coming into the office to attend this conference, so I don't lose my connection at any time during the day. So
Good idea.
I'm not surprised.
Right.
This is a good example. The blackout that you had a couple of weeks ago, the Rogers went down and half of the country now collapsed, right? So we cannot trust anymore, the infrastructure.
Yeah, well, even without the blackout, 3-4 times a day, my connection at home goes down. So I'm not surprised.
Vamos ver se ele volta. Let's see if he can come back quickly.
It usually takes about 5 minutes to reconnect. So.
Bom,
Júlio, mas enquanto ele não volta, você que está também muito familiarizado aí com as transparências, com os catálogos, você podia comentar um pouquinho mais aí, né? O que é que vocês estão fazendo aí em conjunto?
Anyway, I'll put my hand.
Voltou? Não?
não. Até agora não. Agora também a minha tela aqui está... Cadê? Participantes? Não, ele não está mesmo. Não está. Eu mandei o link caiu. Não, ele não respondeu também aqui no Zap. Eu acho que a gente pode encerrar. Eu vou ler a pergunta do Henrique, tá certo? Porque a pergunta do Henrique está aqui para a gente, já se colocaram aqui no chat, né? Então, o Henrique pergunta, does social responsible software may avoid human intentional corruption actions? May it help to reduce organization process corruption vulnerability? Então, quer dizer, o Henrique está perguntando qual é o impacto disso para evitar ações de corrupção, né, nas empresas ou no Estado, desculpa, no governo. E a questão essa o Luiz Marcio teria que responder, mas o movimento geral é exatamente todo o movimento da transparência internacional nesse sentido, né? Principalmente. Aqui, quando a gente vê a transparência e confiança, como o Luiz Marcio retratou, é algo mais geral, né? Então, o Luiz Marcio acabou de me informar que o Danbury estava certo, para variar, né? Danbury. A rede caiu. So, the problem with the company, the link, they don't have internet now. So, we can close the section, thanking Luiz Marcio once again. Was very, what can I say? I believe he is doing a very important job, very important work in bringing this to requirements and to the society, like Danbury smashing the table, because we need to know about it. Thank you, Dan. Jaelson, thank you, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Ciao.